Hi, my name's Estelle Boulay and I work for an organisation called Rights of Women. Rights of Women is a women's legal rights charity that provides services across England and Wales. It was set up in 1975 to ensure that all women have access to the law. Our vision is that all women should achieve equality, safety and justice within the law. So what we do is, our main service is we provide free advice lines that women can call, and our services are particularly aimed at women that are suffering from VAWG, which is violence against women and girls, and that encompasses quite a wide range of different types of abuse and violence. We provide advice to women under family law, criminal law and immigration law so they can understand what their rights are and make informed choices about the next steps in their lives. So Rights of Women is involved in the Ascent project within two strands. We're involved in the advice and counselling strand because we deliver advice lines, but we're also involved in the second tier strand. The second tier strand is a group of 6 organisations that work together to support the entire women's sector and give them all the different resources and help that they might need to strengthen their organisations so ultimately they can deliver better services to women. Second tier support is really important for the women's sector. We're a small sector, so if we work together and actually share resources, share knowledge and strengthen each other, we can all deliver better services to our beneficiaries. We deliver all kinds of things under the second tier strand. So for example, our organisation offers training on relevant issues that are coming up in the law that people might not know about. So recently we've offered training around coercive control, which is a new criminal offence since 2015, and also we work in partnership with other organisations within the strand. So we've worked with IMCAN to deliver training on female genital mutilation and forced marriage. So this is in this way that we can keep organisations up to speed on what's happening in the law, so that they can then support, they can recognise what's happening to women and they can support them adequately, both within their organisations, actually then refer them on to other organisations for support as well. So it's a way of making sure that we work really effectively with the small resources that we have. The Equality Act 2010 is a really important piece of legislation for everyone and certainly for the women's sector. It's an anti-discriminatory framework, so it provides protections to people to stop them from being discriminated against in society. It's divided into 2 parts, and quite a simple basis to understand that is the first part provides a framework for people to challenge individual discrimination that they might experience either at work or when they're involved in getting goods and services, and also if they have any kind of interaction with public bodies. It's really important because it defines discrimination on the basis of protected characteristics, and one of those protected characteristics is gender. So there's a real recognition that women experience gender-based discrimination in society, and then it's a framework for how they can take action to stop that in their circumstances, and then also hopefully that can have effects on how those service providers behave in the future. The public sector equality duty is really important because it places an obligation onto public sector bodies to consider equalities in all that they do. It can include things like doing equality impact assessments and actually just making sure that every time they introduce a new policy or if they provide a service that they consider all the people that might need to access it, and that they make sure that they provide a service that is accessible to everybody. It's really important because it also asks them to promote equalities and to consider it in all that they do. So they should be advancing the equality agenda in society, but also they should be ensuring that they eliminate discrimination and also fostering good relations between different individuals in society. The Equality Act is really important to the women's sector. It provides us with a tool in which to challenge discrimination and to advance equalities in many different ways. So firstly, it's a way that we can support our beneficiaries when they experience discrimination, that we can advise them on how they can take action using the Equality Act. Secondly, it's really important because it contains the public sector equality duty. That's the second part of the Act, and that places an onus and an obligation on public sector bodies to advance and promote equalities. So that's where we can actually work with and hold to account the public sector and ensure that they are considering women and considering women's equality in all that they do. It's also really important because it's quite a detailed framework around discrimination, and it recognises that sometimes there may need to be times when, so for example, women's sector organisations might need to employ only women for a particular reason. And a good reason could be, for example, in a rape crisis centre where a woman going to that service would only feel comfortable or safe if she's actually meeting with a woman. So it allows women's sector organisations to provide those kinds of services and also to employ only women to do that. So it's a very, very important tool for the women's sector. CEDAW is an international human rights treaty that was introduced by the UN in 1979. The UK signed up to it in 1981 and ratified it in 1986, meaning they kind of officially made it valid. It's essentially a Bill of Rights for women and girls, and by signing up to it, the UK has said that it has a commitment to protecting and to promoting equality for women and girls. The focus of CEDAW is very wide, and it's wider than the Equality Act. It recognises the difference and the inequalities between men and women in all spheres of life. So, for example, it recognises the importance of cultural norms in society and the role that they play in actually driving inequality between men and women. So I say it gives us a complete picture around inequality and discrimination, and that's why it's a very, very significant instrument. Whilst the UK is signed up to CEDAW, to make treaties binding in this country, they need to be included into domestic legislation. Now, this was considered when the Equality Act was introduced in 2010, but ultimately it didn't happen. So as it stands, it's a treaty that we're signed up for, but there is not an obligation for the UK to actually adhere with every aspect of it. One of the repercussions of a treaty not being binding is that it can become slightly invisible and neglected in society, and that people don't really know about it. But CEDAW is a really, really powerful and important tool, and used side by side with the Equality Act, the two together can give quite a complete framework of looking at discrimination against women and then taking action against it. Although CEDAW is not binding as such, it's an amazing mechanism. There is a panel of 23 individual experts who will look at all aspects of how the UK is adhering to promoting and protecting against discrimination against women, and then make recommendations about this. This is done once every 4 years, so that's a very, very useful way of actually analysing the progress that's being made in this country on a regular basis, and looking at all the discrimination that women face and looking at all together at one point, because all the different types of discrimination do interact. CEDAW is really powerful because it can shine a light on different areas of inequality between men and women that the Equality Act is too narrow in its focus to address. So some examples of that can be that it looks at some of the discrimination that women face in society if they're migrant women, if they have no recourse to public funds. It also looks at the gender pay gap and how that's progressing or not, and it also looks at other areas. So for example, the most recent CEDAW report looked at the devastating impact of legal aid cuts and how that was affecting women. An example of that would be that women who are experiencing domestic violence are supposed to have access to legal aid, but many women weren't able to provide evidence and couldn't actually get the legal aid. So CEDAW sort of analysed that and made recommendations to ensure that the UK actually improves that access for women. As part of CEDAW, we are also signed up to an additional extension on the treaty, which is called the Optional Protocol. And this is really important because it's a mechanism where individuals can bring complaints around discrimination they've faced across all the different broad areas that CEDAW covers and actually raise them with CEDAW. So that's a really important tool that we could be using alongside the Equality Act and the provisions it has there to allow and support individuals to make discrimination claims. So the two together are very, 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 very powerful, and something that we should be using far more often than we do.